العلم قال الله قال رسوله قال الصحابة هم أولو العرفان. هذا الدين الصحيح، قال الله قال رسوله قال الصحابة.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وهو يتولى الصالحين، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، صلاة وسلاما دائمين متلازمين يوم الدين. أما بعد، حياكم الله ومرحبا بطالب العلم. This is our 17th sitting going for the كتاب الأربعون في مباني الإسلام وقواعد الأحكام، also known as Al-Arba'een النووية، إمام أبي زكريا يحيى بن شرف النووي رحمه الله تعالى. We're still on the fourth hadith. لعل if the brother, if he repeats reading the hadith in Arabic, inshallah ta'ala, to refresh our memory, and we'll carry on where we left off from after he reads the hadith. فليتفضل الأخ القارئ وفق الله السامعين يقرأ لنا الحديث.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا ولوالديه وللسامعين. أما بعد، قال المؤلف رحمه الله: عن أبي عبد الرحمن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال: حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو الصادق المصدوق: إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما، ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك، ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك، ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح، ويؤمر ب4 كلمات: بكتب رزقه وأجله وعمله وشقي أو سعيد. فوالله الذي لا إله غيره، إن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل الجنة حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع، فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل النار فيدخلها. وإن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل النار حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع، فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل الجنة فيدخلها. رواه البخاري ومسلم.
نعم. So far we've taken 2 lessons صح on this hadith number 4 in the kitab. The first lesson we took where the author says in Abi Abdurrahman Abdullah bin Mas'ud رضي الله عنه قال. He spoke about the Sahabi al-Jalil Abdullah bin Mas'ud رضي الله عنه. Then the lesson after that, the second lesson, which was the last lesson, we took from where he said حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو صادق المصدوق إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك. And we stop there. Inshallah ta'ala tonight, inshallah we'll finish off the hadith. If you don't finish it off, then we'll finish it off next lesson. And as you know, ya ikhwata, these lessons, Al-Arba'een Nawawiyyah, the explanation, as I mentioned in the beginning, are specifically going to be detailed. يعني if you're looking for شروحات مختصرة هي كثيرة. If you want to look for a summarized explanation أربعين نووية فلا يخفى شريف علمكم. It's not hidden from any one of you the amount of explanation that are available in Arabic and in English. لكن from my knowledge I haven't seen a detailed explanation on أربعين نووية. And I mentioned before, as our مشايخ they say, ومنهم شيخنا عبد الرزاق البدر, he used to stress this to us حفظه الله, that the one who truly understands this kitab يا إخوة الأربعون نووية, the one who truly understands this, he will be a alim, as if he will be a alim in every affair of the religion. And you will find this, you will see this, يعني once you study it properly, all of these ahadith, you will see it will change your life بإذن الله تعالى, by the permission of Allah سبحانه وتعالى. فلذلك يحتاج إلى الصبر, يحتاج إلى الصبر وإلى المجاهدة going through this lesson إن شاء الله تعالى. يعني I don't make it too detailed to the point that's overwhelming, لكن I don't make it short either. We try to mention the benefits, يعني make it يعني intermediate in terms of its length, لكن comprehensive, and that's the goal بإذن الله تعالى. صلى الله عز وجل التوفيق. طيب, so we left off last lesson يا إخوة أني مسألة, right? I mentioned where we stopped. ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك. For the part that we took from last lesson, we learned that the janeen, the fetus, it passes through the 3 stages. The first is a nutfa, which is the mixture of the man's and the woman's fluids for 40 days. Then it's a alaqa, which is a clot of blood for 40 days. And then it is a mudghah, a lump of flesh for 40 days, during which time its form takes shape. But the apparent meaning of the hadith in front of us is clear, صح? يعني these are the 3 stages, which يعني in completion is 120 days. Like I mentioned at the end of last lesson, there are some authentic narrations in Bukhari or in Muslim. We mentioned these narrations last lesson at the end, that indicates that these 3 stages, it actually occurs at 40 or 42 days. Like in the hadith in front of us, it shows it occurs within 120 days. All right? Like in the other narrations, we mentioned a narration last lesson. If we go back to that last lesson, if you want to write down the narrations, and those who are revising, I've inshallah already written it down. That's mentioned that these 3 stages occur within 40 or 42 days. But there's a narration in Muslim of this hadith, and there's 2 narrations in Bukhari that doesn't mention the word nutfa. Rather, they state that the creation is created in the mother's womb for 40 days. And then the hadith details what happens during these 40 days, these 3 stages. And this is the view held by some scholars as well, that these 3 stages occur within 40 or 42 days, and also by many of the doctors of today. And we left off on that mas'ala. I mentioned at the end, how do we reconcile between this hadith and the other hadith and the kalam of the atibba, the doctors of today, that these 3 stages actually occur within 40 or 42 days. Whereas the hadith in front of us of Ibn Mas'ud, it indicates it occurs within 120 days. How do we reconcile between both? Our Shaykh Sulaiman Rahili Hafidhahullah, when he taught us this mas'ala, and when he taught us this hadith as well, in Masjid Quba in Medina, he mentioned, and this is the opinion of many scholars, and it's a balanced view, fil haqiqah. He mentioned the way we reconcile between the other narration and this narration is we say that the janeen, the fetus, is shaped and formed like a outline drawing or like a sketch when it reaches 40 or 42 days. And if the embryo passes 80 days, it becomes its physical form of this outline until it is fully complete by 120 days. Does that make sense, ikhwata? Because if you understand this, the problem is solved, صح? Because there's a great deal of confusion regarding this mas'ala. Many ask about this mas'ala. And you find كلام طويل بين أهل العلم في هذه المسألة. لكن if you understand that there are 2 stages. The first stage is the image and the outline of the organs, which occurs within the first 40 or 42 days. The second stage is the creation and formation of the organs, which occurs in that next stage. Does that make sense, يا إخوة? عندنا خلق التصوير وخلق الإيجاد. The image and the outline, والله المثل الأعلى, is like a blueprint that's made for a building. The eye is imaged, the mouth is imaged, and so on. And then the creation, the formation is what happens after it has passed 80 days, until it is complete at 120. And the soul by which the life is breathed into the fetus is breathed into it when it has reached 120 days. And this does not contradict movement before it. But the janeen, the fetus, he may move before 120 days, before the ruh is breathed into the janeen. But the mother, she may feel movement before that, even though that the soul has not been breathed into it. The ruh has not been breathed into the fetus. It's not something impossible that, for example, after 40 days, the fetus begins to move. Then there's movement within it. Lakin, no, ya ikhwata, that this movement is not a movement of life. It's not a movement of life. The movement of life is after 120 days, when the ruh is breathed into it. Because the fetus in the mother's womb, it has 2 types of movements. حركات الإرادية وحركات لا إرادية. حركات الإرادية is the voluntary movement of the fetus, which only occurs after the breathing of the ruh, the soul, into the fetus, which is after 120 days. The second type of movement of the fetus is involuntary movement. Okay, and this can occur before and after the soul is breathed into it. And even modern medical science establishes that the breathing of the soul into the fetus and the resulting of voluntary movements, such as grasping the umbilical cord and sleeping and walking and turning over, and other actions of the fetus, occurs at the end of the fetus 120th day of development. And this is established by modern medical science and by the scholars from the past. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned this fact that this is something that have agreed upon, that the breathing of the soul occurs after the 4 months. As for the movement of the fetus before that, prior to this period, the involuntary movement, this is not the movement of life. This movement does not stem from the presence of life, because the ruh is not breathed into it. Rather, it results from the growth and the nourishment of the fetus, the fetus itself growing or being moved around by the air around it. This movement of growth and nourishment is not voluntary from the fetus. And there's no text from the Sharia that contradicts this. And many of the scholars from the past have explicitly affirmed this. ومنهم Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentions this في تحفة المولود. نعم. We can say, ikhwata, that there's 3 terms regarding the formation of the created being. We have what is called taswir, we have what is called khalq, and we have what is called al-bar. And this is mentioned in the last verse of Surah Al-Hashr. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور. Al-musawwar means the one who gives a thing the appearance of a sketched form, which, as we mentioned, is what happens by the 40th and 42nd day. And these 3 stages, there's the way it looks in the womb of the mother is as an outline of a drawing, or like a sketch, like a blueprint. Then we have al-khalq. Al-khalq is the creation of the fetus, and establishing its limbs, its organs, and the likes. And then we have al-bar'u. Al-bar'u is the completion and perfection. And this is all evident, these 3 things in the fetus. And this mas'ala, ikhwat, is extremely important to understand. And the mas'ala we mentioned of reconciling between the 2 evidences. Okay, so we have the evidence here of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that indicates that these 3 stages, it occurs within 120 days. Then we have other evidences that indicates that these 3 stages occur within 40 or 42 days. And we just explained right now how to reconcile between the both. And the doctors of today as well, they say it occurs within 40 or 42 days. So what we just mentioned now is how we reconcile between the both. And this is important to know. Why? Because based on this comes many masail, ikhwata. There's many ahkam and masail that comes based on this. From that is hukm al-ijhad wa isqat al-janin, the ruling of abortion method. So we have taken that in the third 40-day period, the blood transforms into a mass of flesh, and then the human being begins to take shape in the final 40-day period. So when the final 40-day period begins, which is after 80, formation and development commence. For bones form and are then covered with flesh within those 40 days. Based on this, ikhwata, is it permissible to abort what is in the womb if it has not reached 40 days? For example, a brother or a man has jima' with his wife. After 2 or 3 weeks, he discovers that she has conceived and is now pregnant. Is it permissible to abort what is in the womb? Majority of Ahl-Ilm, and this is the madhab of Imam Ahmad, they say it's permissible. We're talking about if it has not reached 40 days yet, so it's below 40 days. Okay, is it permissible? And the woman has found out she's pregnant. It's been below 40 days. Is it permissible to abort the child? Majority of Ahlul Ilm, including the madhab of Imam Ahmad, they say it's permissible. Why is it permissible? Because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that it is a drop of fluid. Wal-ma, it's like water. For the water is allowed to expel it from the womb by qiyas and analogy of the principle of contraception that is allowed. And the principle that states that a man who has jima' with his wife, and if he wishes to release, that he may practice al-azl, right? With the condition, according to the majority, that he has to have the wife's consent. For the fact that this is allowed, as is come in Sahihain, Jabir Abdullah anhu narrated that he said, "Kunna na'zilu wal Quran yanzil," that we used to practice coitus interrupt whilst the Quran was being revealed. يعني وإن another narration كنا نعزل على عهد رسول الله عليه السلام فبلغ ذلك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فلم ينهنا. يعني that we used to do this at the time of the Messenger عليه الصلاة والسلام, and he reached him that we used to do this, and he never prohibited us. For they say, يعني the majority, the fact that this is allowed, يعني to يعني the principle of contraception as al-azl is permissible or is allowed, يعني by qiyas is allowed to abort what is below 40 days because it's also water, it's ma. وابن رجب رحمه الله في جامع العلوم الحكم, جامع العلوم والحكم, which is the best explanation of Al-Arba'een An-Nawawiyyah and the Umdah, he mentioned that this opinion is weak. Why? Because the water now has come together to start the formation of the fetus. So it's different to the water of contraception, right? As Allah Azza wa Jal says, فَجَعَلْنَاهُ فِي قَرَارٍ مَكِينٍ إِلَّا قَدْرٍ مَعْلُومٍ. We have placed it, يعني the water, in a firm lodging in the womb. إِلَّا قَدْرٍ مَعْلُومٍ, for a known extent. لكن الله أعلم, لعل the most strongest opinion, and this is the opinion of many of Ahl al-Ilm, and it's a balanced opinion, and our Shaykh Salman Rahili Hafidhullah mentioned this as well when he taught us the hadith, is that abortion within 40 days, the first 40 days, is only permissible in cases of haja, is only permissible in cases of haja, in need, yani great need. What's considered haja is when, for example, a woman is taking medication at that time and that medication is incompatible with the pregnancy. It will cause her problems. Or if she has recently given birth, and for her to have a child now, just recently after giving birth, is going to cause her extreme hardship. Or similar circumstances. These are examples of what is considered a haja. But in such cases, it will be permissible for her to do abortion within these 40 days. So long يعني that the pregnancy has not reached 40 days. If the pregnancy has reached or progressed beyond 40 days, between what's after 40 days and below or before 120, and before the soul is breathed into it, then abortion is only permissible in cases of darura. A darura is if the woman is fearing death. That's what a darura is, or what is similar to it. So if the doctors declare that the pregnancy may pose a danger to the woman, potentially leading her to death, and 3 doctors have testified to this, then abortion will be permissible in this case. Or otherwise, it will not be permissible. As for if the ruh has been blown, and after 120 days, 4 months, she's been pregnant, then it is not permissible to abort it because it's killing a nafs. It's killing a nafs. Also from the important rulings that is connected to the janeen in the mother's womb is if the janeen dies, if the fetus dies in the mother's womb. This matter is divided into 3 in regards to the rulings connected to it. If it was before 80 days that the fetus dies in the mother's womb, and before the creation is formed, before 80 days, then the woman is not considered to be in a state of nifas. And the child is not to be named, or shrouded, or a aqiqah being done, or given ghusl, or prayed upon. And hatta even being buried in a Muslim graveyard, it can be buried anywhere. And if the fetus dies before 80 days. That's the first situation. The second situation is if it dies after 80 days but before 4 months. If it dies after 80 days but before 4 months. Yani before the ruh is breathed into it. For here the woman is considered to be in a state of nifas, lakin the child is not to be named, nor is it to be shrouded, or given ghusl, or prayed upon, or a aqiqah being done upon it, lakin as well is to be buried anywhere. And the third situation is if it's after 120 days. Yani after the ruh has been breathed into the janeen, or before it coming out alive. So it's after 120 days, yani after 4 months, يعني the ruh is breathed into it, the janeen, but before it has come out alive. For here the woman is considered to be in a state of nifas, and the child is named and is given ghusl and is shrouded and is to be prayed upon and is to be buried in a Muslim graveyard. And is to be buried in a Muslim graveyard. طبعا يعني in terms of giving a child a name, there's a difference of opinion in regards to that, and also the aqiqah, there's a difference of opinion. Like in many scholars, they say to name the child, to name the child. And now that's the three situations. If the janeen, the fetus, dies in the womb of the mother. As for if it comes out alive and then it dies, if the janeen, it came out alive, after the 9 months, and the woman gave birth, it came out alive, but it died. For here, the woman is considered nifas, is in a state of nifas. The child is to be named and to be given ghusl and to be shrouded and to be prayed upon and buried in a Muslim graveyard. So he's given a name as well, and aqiqah is to be done upon that child. And there are also many other ahkam connected to the janeen. I think these two I mentioned are from the most important and most asked questions that are asked in regards to the masala of the janeen. And it's built upon what we were speaking about. It was built upon what we're speaking about. That's why we mentioned it. Like there's other ahkam. There's ahkam madiyya wa kifar. And if the miscarriage is intentional or due to an external assault after the soul is breathed into it, the ruh is breathed into it, then a full blood money is due. If the fetus is stillborn or expiation is required. There's also ahkam fi ibadat. For example, in fasting, if the woman is pregnant and fasting, she may break her fast during Ramadan. And she fears for her own health or the health of her feet, of her janeen. She's only required to make up the mistakes. ويعني the أحكام of nifas as well. The أحكام of nifas. يعني the نعم, which is we don't go into it. We'll go into في زاد إن شاء الله تعالى. وفي أحكام في حقوق المالية when it comes to the right of inheritance ووصية, with the two conditions that is already in the room at the time of a person's death and that it is born alive. There are many ahkam, that's why it's important to know the mas'ala of the stages of the fetus in the womb that we just mentioned and how we reconcile between the different evidences. This is why it's important, because there are ahkam that are built upon it. I know, ya ikhwata, that the fetus, the janeen, has rights. Na'am. It has حقوق يعني. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah in his kitab تحفة المولود بأحكام المولود, تحفة المولود بأحكام المولود, he mentioned, says, most of the corruption of children comes from their fathers and the neglectful of them, and their failure to teach them the obligations of the sunnah of the religion, the obligations and the sunnah of the religion. For they wasted them when they were young, so they did not benefit themselves and they did not benefit their fathers when they grew old. Just as some of them rebuked their children for disobedience, the child said, "Oh, my father, you disobeyed me when I was small, so I disobeyed you when I grew old. You wasted me when I was a baby, so I wasted you when you became an old man." For the child, ya ikhwata, it will come back to you if you do not give the rights to hatta the janeen. Even before the child is even born, it has rights. If you do not give its rights, it will come back to you. And you will see the punishment within your own life when the child is born. For like the parents have rights over the child, the children also have rights over the parents that should be observed and fulfilled. It's among the things that the servant will be questioned about before Allah Azza wa Jal. And of the children, who are a great blessing, a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that must be appreciated. Yani. His rights must be fulfilled. For the children, their rights divide into two parts. The first is before the existence, and before birth, and the second is after the existence and appearance in the world. As for the rights before birth, from the most important of them is to be a righteous man yourself, even if you're not even married yet. Even if you're not even married yet, and you have the intention of having a child, know that a man is already there. Upon you is to already think about giving that janeen its rights. From the most important rights is you yourself to be a righteous man or a woman, to be a righteous woman, and to choose a righteous spouse. following the etiquettes when it comes to the sunnah or when it comes to jima', making dua, and if the woman is hamil, to give close attention to the janeen in terms of what she's eating, what's going in. And the second is the rights after birth. And the rights after birth, from that is, or from the etiquette they mention, is tahniq with the date, to direct him to the qibla, to seek refuge in Allah Azza wa Jalla, to protect him from evil, to make dua, to bless the child, as the wife of Imran, the mother of Maryam, did this. فلما وضعتها قالت ربي إني وضعتها أنثى والله أعلم بما وضعت وليس ذكرك الأنثى وإني سميتها مريم وإني أعوذها بك وذريتها من الشيطان الرجيم. And she said, I've named her Maryam, and I seek refuge for her in you and for her descendants from shaitan. This is from the etiquette, when the child is born, to make dua straight away. Seek refuge in Allah to protect the child from evil, and to make dua to bless the child. Or some Ahl Ilm, they mention to do the adhan. Some they consider it authentic, or from the sunnah, and some they say it's not from it's not authentic narrations. To do adhan in the right ear and iqam in the left ear. To name the child with a good name. To do the aqiqah on the 7th day. Al-khitan, to give the circumcision on the child if it's a boy. The rights of the breastfeeding, spending and providing for the child. Then there's a stage when they're alive as well, when they reach tamyiz. Upon you is now to start teaching them what benefits them as soon as they're able to speak, teaching them in terms of their deen and their dunya, what's obligatory upon them to learn of the religion, nurturing them with good manners, being merciful and just with them, being concerned with who your child marries, looking at the needs, solving their dilemmas, sitting with them. إلى آخره. It requires muhadara fil haqiqah, speaking about this mas'ala. The point is, know that the janeen has rights. And something I always advise brothers, when brothers come up to me asking about advice before marriage, something I always advise the young brothers, and advise the sisters as well, is for those who are not married, and for those who do not have children yet, to do your research and write a small book for yourself, as if you're writing it for yourself. Do your research in detail, write a small book which you can use as a manual throughout your entire life in your marriage and when raising children. So before you get married, before you have a child, research on the mas'ala every day. مسائل وحقوق of the العشرة بين الزوجين مثلا، حقوق الأولاد. Do your research and write a book yourself. And perhaps give this as a gift when you get married. Give this as a gift when you get married. Many times when spouses, when they get married, the first gifts they think of giving one another, stuff like perfumes and clothes and books written by other people, which there's nothing wrong with. لكن نعمة how excellent would it be if they wrote a book for one another, according to the Kitab and Sunnah on marriage and how to raise children, as a manner they can both use for the rest of their lives and they can revise with every week. Now, طيب. فدن the Messenger عليه الصلاة والسلام, he says in the Hadith, ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه روح. Then there is sent to him the angel who blows his soul into him after 120 days. After 120 days, the ruh is breathed into him. The Messenger عليه الصلاة والسلام, he says, ثم يرسل الله إليه الملك. ثم يرسل الله, in another narration, ثم يرسل إليه الملك, or ثم يرسل الله إليه الملك, in another narration, ثم يبعث الله ملكا. And the words يرسل and another narration يبعث, it can have one of two meanings. Either it is the sending of another angel, and Allah sends another angel to blow the ruh into the janeen. Or the meaning of yursilu or yab'athu, sending here, is commanding to blow the ruh into the janeen, to the same angel that is being entrusted with the womb concerning the fetus, since it was a nutfa from the day of 42 or 45, as is common in another narration narrated by Hudayfa ibn Usayd, we mentioned last lesson. يدخل الملك على نطفة بعدما تستقر في رحم ب40 أو 45 ليلة. The angel comes to the janeen, the fetus, when it's a nutfa, when it's 42 or 45 days. فإت is said that it is the same angel. يعني يرسل الله إليه الملك أو ثم يبعث الله ملكا. It is said that the word يرسل ويبعث means أيؤمر, that he is being commanded. يؤمر. يعني the same angel that is with the Janeen from the day of 42 or 45 is being commanded now to blow the ruh into the Janeen. And some Ahl-Ilm, they say rather it's another angel that is being sent for this specific job, to blow the ruh into the Janeen. The verb يرسل ويؤمر is both attributed to the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For He is the one who sends and He is the one who commands subhanahu wa ta'ala. For there is neither will nor choice for the angel, despite their strength and their closeness to the Janeen. يعني it is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. For when the soul is breathed into it, the woman senses a slight movement and it continues to move gradually after that, because the soul has been breathed into it now. And the soul, the ruh, is the essence of life. And the essence of life is not the breath, it's not breathing, respiration, by which a person lives after emerging. The essence of life is the ruh. Because when the Janeen is in the mother's womb, it doesn't require that type of breathing and breath, the respiration. But it possesses the ruh, the soul that constitutes the life. And this is one of the greatest signs that refutes the atheist, who say that we do not believe in the existence of Allah because we do not see Him. To these people it is said, you are now as you move, and you have a soul within you. Do you see the ruh? Huh? Do you see the ruh? And now the soul that is within you, by the permission of Allah, you will die and the soul will leave you. Have you seen it? Or do you see it when someone dies? But you believe in it. You believe that you're alive and you believe that it will leave you. This is a proof against them, a testament to the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His power. And the humans, they have no knowledge of the ruh, and in terms of its specific nature. But this is something that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said in Surah Al-Isra, and He asked you, O Muhammad, about the soul. Say that the soul, the ruh, is of the affair, yani concern of my Lord. وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And you, O mankind, have not been given knowledge except that which is little. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he mentioned Ahl al-Kalam, the philosophers and the likes, they went into deviation by trying to explain what is a ruh, and they fell into confusion because of it. You see from them, they mention is a'rad. It's an accidental attribute, meaning a quality of the body. Like the quality of a body is like height and shortness, whiteness and blackness. They say the soul is like that. Others, they claim that the soul, the ruh, is blood. Or others, they claim that is merely a part of a human being, like the hand and the leg. And this, due to such understanding and such interpretation, they fell into confusion and understanding in other masail. As for Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, for we do not transgress what is in the Kitab al Sunnah. The ruh is a matter of the unseen. For we say, as Allah Azza wa Jal, He said in the ayah, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلُ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. We say that it is a matter concerning or affair that is of our Lord. It is from the unseen, we have no knowledge of. We know that it is a creation from the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we do not know the nature of this breathing or the soul, and how the soul becomes united with the body, how the ruh becomes united with the body. And this is from the points that refutes those who try to contemplate and describe how Allah's attributes are. If you cannot fully comprehend your own ruh, which is something within you, how can you attempt to fathom the how of Allah's attributes? He who is so great and majestic for you to even encompass. Since you cannot even grasp the nature of your own soul, let alone the how of Allah's attributes. So how can one have the audacity to even attempt to understand or even ask about it? ولذلك Imam Malik rahimahullah, when he was asked about the istiwa of Allah Azza wa Jal, how is the rising of the throne of Allah Azza wa Jal? He said, Su'al anhu bid'ah. This question is a bid'ah. This question is a bid'ah. نعم. طيب, as for the ayah, فإذا سويته ونفخت فيه من روحي فاقعوا له ساجدين. When I have proportioned him and breathed into him my created soul, من روحي, then fall down to him in prostration. من روحي, because some people they say that this soul is Allah, is part of Allah. Every person they have a part of Allah in them, like the Ghulat al-Sufiyin. That's ayah where Allah Azza wa Jal says, فيه من روحي ونفخت فيه من روحي, and I breathed into him, or it was breathed into him, my ruh. The attribution of ruhi here to Allah Azza wa Jal is a attribution إضافة تشريفا وتعظيما. It is an attribution of signifying honor and veneration. It does not imply that the ruh is an attribute of Allah Himself. We see this a lot in the Quran. وروحي إخوة هي سر حياة كما هو معلوم. It's a secret of life. And scholars they state that there are 4 or 5 types of connection between life and the ruh and the body. As Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah mentions Kitab al-Ruh. But the ruh is connected to the body in 5 different ways. The first is the connection to the body as a fetus in his mother's womb. And this is a weak connection, wherein life belongs to the body, while the ruh, the soul's attachment to it is weak. The second is the connection to the body after a person is born. And the connection is suited to the body's survival in this world. For life belongs to the body, while the soul is subordinate. وَالْحَيَاةُ فِيهَا لِلْبَدَنِ وَرُوحُ تَبَعٍ. That's the asl in the dunya. The ruh follows on from the life of the body. The third is the connection to the body when a person is asleep. When the ruh is connected in one way and separated from another way. And some of the differentiate between nafs and ruh. وعلى كل حال, يعني, if you want to look that up, you can look it up, inshallah. And the fourth is the connection of the body, or to the body, fil barzakh, when it has departed from the body and separated from it. But it is not separated completely in such a way there is no connection to it at all. For here, life, it belongs to the ruh, and the body is subordinate. For it's the opposite of when we're in the dunya. فالحياة فيه لروح والبدن تبع. And as you know, يا إخوة, عقيدة أهل السنة is what? When it comes to the punishment of the grave, is it on the ruh or is it on the body? Is it on the soul or is it on the body? It's on the soul and the body. لكن the body is تبع. The asl is that it's on the soul. It's possible that it could be on the body as well. And the fifth is the connection of the ruh to the body on the day when bodies will be resurrected. And this is the most perfect form of connection between the ruh and the body. The life of the ruh, between the life connection of the ruh and the body and life. Because life here will belong to both the body and the ruh completely. For there will be an ultimate form of attachment. That's why the bodies will never die. They will never feel sleepy. For those who enter Jannah, or have any deficiencies. Naam. Then the Messenger alayhi salatu wassalam, he said after that, ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه روح. ينفخ فيه روح ويؤمر بأربع كلمات. Who is commanded with 4 matters. Who is commanded with 4 matters. Now, they're commanded, the angels are servants who receive commands or prohibitions. فيؤمر بأربع كلمات. This is from the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal on the angels. طيب, فيؤمر بأربع كلمات. They're commanded with 4 matters. When does these 4 matters take place in recording them? فيؤمر بأربع كلمات. They have to write 4 things. The angels. The angel has to write 4 things. When does the 4 things or 4 matters take place in writing or in recording? We have some narrations that state that the angel visits the fetus when it reaches 42 or 45 days, or 40 days. And he asks about these 4 matters and is informed of them, and then he records them. The hadith of Hudayfa ibn Usayd, and I mentioned the hadith last lesson. However, this hadith in front of us, of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, indicates that the recording of these four things occurs after the fetus reaches 120 days. There's two matters here to highlight. The first is ذكر الأحاديث التي قد يوهم ظاهرها التعارض, is to firstly mention the ahadith which apparent meaning may suggest contradiction with this hadith. So we have the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud in front of us, which indicates that the writing of these four things occurs after 120 days. صح? Then we have the hadith that is in Sahihain of Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, where he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has appointed an angel over the womb who says, Ya Rabbi nutfatun, Ya Rabbi alaqatun, Ya Rabbi mudghatun. إذا أراد أن يقضي خلقه قال أذكر أم أنثى شقي أم سعيد فما رزقه والأجل فيكتب في بطن أمي. For the angel he says, Allah has, oh Allah, a nutfa, oh Allah, a alaqa, oh Allah, a mudgha. That when he intends to complete his creation, he says, male or female, rich or blessed, what will be its provision and lifespan? And it is written while it is in the mother's womb. وفي صحيح مسلم الحديث of Hudhayfa bin Usayd radiallahu anhu, he said that the angel enters upon the nutfa after he has settled in the womb for 40 or 45 nights and says, Ya Rab, is it destined for misery or happiness? For it is written. Then he says, Ya Rab, أذكر أو أنثى, is it a male or female? So it is written. Then he says, Ya Rab, is it يعني, so it's written. Then he says, and its deeds and its lifespan and its provision are written. Then the scrolls are folded and nothing is added. And in another narration, when 42 nights have passed over the nutfa, Allah sends an angel to it who shapes it and creates its hearing, sight, skin, flesh and bones. And then he says, Ya Rab, adhakar untha, or Rab, is it a male or female? So your Lord decrees what he wills and the angel writes it down. Then he says, Ya Rab, and its lifespan. So your Lord decrees what he wills and the angel writes it down. And then he says, Ya Rab, his provision. So your Lord decrees what he wills and the angel writes it down. Then the angel leaves with the scroll in his hand, neither adding nor subtracting what he was. So that's the first matter to see. To see these narrations and the narration of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, which shows that in the apparent there's a contradiction. Well, there's no contradiction in the Sharia. Like from the apparent, with our little knowledge, one may think there's a contradiction. Because these narrations indicate the angel visits the fetus when it reaches 40, 45, or 42 days. And he asks about these four matters and he's informed of them and he records it. Whereas the hadith in front of us, it indicates that this recording of these four things occurs when the fetus, the janeen, reaches 120 days. But that's the first mas'ala. We mentioned that hadith. The second mas'ala is the scholars' opinions regarding this apparent contradiction, which in reality is not a contradiction. Okay? So there's two madhabs in answering this mas'ala. The first madhab are those who give preference to one hadith over the other. And the second madhab are those who reconcile between the evidences. As for the first madhab of Ahl-Ilm, their approach is tarjih, madhab tarjih. For they give preference to the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu over the hadith of Hudhayfa bin Usayd and the others that we mentioned. Because they say that the wording is not established in its word, the hadith is not well established in its wording. That's why Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, refrained from narrating the hadith of Hudhayfa bin Usayd. Then there's the second madhab, يعني طائفة من أهل العلم, a group of Ahl al-Ilm, where they are madhab al-jam', يعني they try to reconcile between the evidences. And they differed in their method of how to reconcile between the evidences. But there's several approaches. The first of them are those who say that it can be said the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu is explicit, that the writing occurs after the third 40 days, yani 120 days, when the embryo has fully developed into a lump of flesh. As for the hadith of Hudhayfa bin Usayd, they say it only states that it cures after the first 40 days without specifying a time limit. But they say that the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud specifies and limits this. For they say in such cases, what do? We say that the general statement is interpreted in light of the specific one. But they say, in summary, this approach is that the nutfa, from its initial stage as a clot, through its development as a lump of flesh, and its formation, the burning of the ruh to the soul after the third 40 days, they said that this can all occur after the first 40 days. And it's not necessary that it occurs immediately afterward. So they say that the hadith of Hudayfa aligns with the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud or Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. He said regarding this approach, that is a good view. That's one approach of how to reconcile, or how some Ahl-Ilm, they say how we can reconcile between the different evidences when it comes to the writing, or the time of the writing of these four things. Al-Maslak al-Thani, the second approach of some Ahl-Ilm they mention, is that the writing occurs in the second 40 days, as in the hadith of Hudayfa ibn Usayd, the second 40 days. And they responded to the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radhiyallahu anhu that is in front of us. They say that ثم يرسل إليه الملك is معطوف to the wording يجمع في بطن أمه 40 يوما, or يجمع في بطن أمه. So they said that the ثم يرسل إليه الملك, then he sends an angel. This is connected, is معطوف to يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه, the beginning of the hadith, that he's gathered in his mother's womb, and then he becomes a clot. And they say that interjection between the ma'tuf and the ma'tuf alayh is permissible in Arabic. But they say ثم يرسل إليه الملك is actually connected to where he says in the beginning يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه. As for what comes between these two wordings, what's the word in English? It's an interjection between the ma'tuf and ma'tuf alayh, which is permissible in the Arabic language. Let me just try and make that easier to understand. So its mention, they say its mention was delayed in the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud anhu after mentioning the three stages, the nutfa, wa alaqa, wa nutfa, in which the fetus changes. So mention them in the order was more appropriate. To say it before ثم يرسل إليه الملك, that the angel sent to them and he's commanded to do such and such. Well, Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh Hafidhullah, he said that this opinion is the most accurate. So he said that the hadith جاء على وجه تقديم وتأخير. What is mentioned in this hadith is in the form of an order of precedence and precedence and delay. And that is because including this in the context of mentioning the gradual progression of pregnancy is not appropriate in terms of the language. Rather, what is meant first is to mention a gradual progression, then after that to mention the breathing of the soul, because it's connected to what preceded it. As for the writing, even though it was during those 120 days, it was delayed because it is not appropriate to include it so that the three stages in which the future changes will not be interrupted. Does that make sense, Ikhwat? And he said this is something that is known in the language, and it's from the beauty of the language. And we see this in the Quran. For example, Allah Azza wa Jal, he says in Surah Sajda, الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه وبدأ خلق الإنسان من طين ثم جعل نسله من سلالة من ماء مهين ثم سواه ونفخ فيه من روحه. Allah Azza wa Jal, he says in Surah Sajda, he who perfected everything which he created and began the creation of man from clay. ثم جعل نسله من سلالة من ماء مهين. Then he made this out of the extract of liquid, the many. Then he proportioned him and breathed into him from him the ruh. So here the orders and the creation of man began from clay. Then he made his offspring from a lineage of the many, the sperm. Even though this lineage does not belong to Adam here, meaning the breathing of the ruh preceded the existence of the offspring. The creation of man began from clay. Then the spirit, the ruh, was breathed into it. Then the water of the offspring was made from the many. For here in these verses in Surah Sajda, the breathing of the ruh was delayed, even though it actually comes in between them. And that is due to the compatibility of mentioning the water after clay. يعني those upon this opinion, they say the hadith, they agree with each other. And this is closest in terms of the language. In terms of the language. Does that make sense يا إخوة؟ فيجمع خلقه ببطن أمه. His creation is formed in his mother's يعني in his mother's womb. يعني that which is connected to it that comes after that in reality is ثم يرسل إليه الملك. لكن he mentions the three stages of being a nutfa وعلق ومضغة due to it being appropriate to mention the three stages due to being appropriate يعني in the language. That's why I interrupted between that and mentioning nafkh ruh, because the nafkh ruh in reality it comes after these three things. Now, another approach, the third approach, is some Ahl-Ilm, they say the writing varies according to the emperor. For some it is written after the 40 or first 40 days, and others after the third 40 days. And this is the view favored by the likes of Ibn Rajab, rahimahullah. And the fourth approach, and the last I will mention, and this is the most strongest opinion, Allahu A'lam, and this was chosen by the likes of Shaykh al-Islam and Taymiyyah ibn Qayyim rahimahullah and other than them, is that the writing, it occurs twice. Once after the first 40 days, after the nutfa, after the first 40 days, and again after the third 40 days, after the embryo. For the angel is assigned to the fetus, who is appointed to it from the moment he enters the womb. And when he asks Allah, once the fetus reaches 40 or 42 days, whether it is a male or female. Before that point, the matter rests solely with Allah Azza wa Jal. No one knows whether it's male or female. But when it reaches 40 or 42 days in the mother's womb, the angel asks Allah, is it a male or female? And Allah informs him, and the angel learns its gender. Then he also asks about the four matters, which we're going to discuss inshallah. And Allah informs him of these four matters, so he records them. But when does this happen? The angel records them when the fetus, the janeen, reaches 40 or 42 days. Then when it reaches 120 days, Allah sends the angel to enter the womb and to breathe the ruh into the fetus, and then he records these four matters upon it. So the recording, it occurs twice. Once when the fetus reaches 40 or 42 days, and this recording is for the angel's record. And the second time is when it reaches 120 days and the ruh is breathed into it, and this recording pertains to the fetus itself. And that's the most precise explanation that is offered to reconcile between the different narrations. Wallahu a'lam. For so far we have learned, ikhwata, what have we learned so far? That the fetus undergoes two stages of creation in the womb. خلق التصوير وخلق التكوين. The creation of its form, meaning its shaping and outlining, and the creation of its actual existence, the formation of its organs. The shape occurs when it reaches 42 days, 40 or 42 days, at which point its features and outlines are sketched out. The creation of its actual existence, where its organs are formed and is brought into being, occurs during the third 40-day period. We've also learned that the writing of these four affairs, that the angels are signed with to record, occurs twice. The first recording takes place when the janeen, the fetus, reaches 42 days. For the angel asks Allah, is it a male or female? And Allah informs him, and he learns is it its gender. And then he asks about the four matters. He asks about the four matters. بِكَتْبِ رِزْقِهِ وَأَجْلِهِ وَعَمَلِهِ وَشَقِيٌّ وَسَعِيدٌ. And then he writes it down. He records it for the fetus while it's in the womb, once he has completed also 120 days. So the first time he records it after 40 or 42 days, and the second time after 120 days, as we already mentioned. طيب. قد يسأل السائل يقول قائل, what language is it written in? The angel that writes these four things down. Allahu musta'an. What language is it written in? What do we say? If someone asked that question, how would you answer it? Muhammad.
أحسن الله إليكم. The language isn't important, but the fact that they've written it down, that's the part that it focuses on the hadith.
طيب. Let's say the person says it's important. What's your answer?
Allah knows best.
Ahsant. Allah knows best. Allahu a'lam. Such questions is a bid'ah. Such questions is an innovation. Remember, يا إخوة, كلمتان ممنوعتان في بابين. I repeat this a lot to the students. Two words, be very cautious of saying in two places. To say لماذا في باب القدر. To say why when it comes to matters of qadr. And to say كيف في باب الغيب. To say how when it comes to the unseen. Don't ask about how when it comes to unseen. For such questions, what language is it written in? From the unseen, هذا من الغيب يعني. Asking such questions is a bid'ah. We believe in the text and we restrict ourselves to that and khalas. We don't do too much and go into too much like the philosophers and the likes to do, which makes them or leads them to misguidance. طيب. في سؤال آخر, where is it being written? Yani where is the place of the writing? And this is something that has delil. It's from the unseen, but we have a delil. Okay, where is the four things written? It's been reported that it's written between the eyes of the fetus, as narration attributed to Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. Now, where he mentioned that when Allah creates the soul, the ruh, the angel of the womb asks, oh Allah, is it a male or female? Allah decrees the match to him. Then he asks, oh Allah, is it rich or blessed? Allah decrees the matter. Then what the person will encounter, even the calamity that will before him, is written between his eyes. لكن حتى نكبة ينكبها. So he says it's written between his eyes. And then we have another narration in Sahih Muslim, hadith of Hudayfa ibn Usayd, that mentions that the writing takes place on a scroll. That the writing takes place on a scroll. ثم تطوى الصحف فلا يزاد فيها ولا ينقص. After the questions are asked, he mentioned the scrolls are rolled up, nothing's added to them, nor anything is subtracted. We have a narration that is recorded on a scroll, and we have another narration that is inscribed upon the fetus's forehead. How do we reconcile between both? The scholars they say the answer is simple. It could be that it's written on a scroll and it's also written between the eyes, yani, of the fetus. Now, and this recording is known as تقدير العمري, the lifespan decree. Okay, as you know, يا إخوة, تقديرات أنواع. We have قدر السنوي, we have القدر اليومي, we have القدر العمري, like that which is four things. These four things that are written is from تقدير العمري, from the lifespan decree. Yearly decree is that of Laylatul Qadr, and we have a decree that happens every day. We have al-Qadr al-Sabiq, Taqdir al-Sabiq, that is that which is in Lawh al-Mahfuz. That which is in Lawh al-Mahfuz. Everything is in Lawh al-Mahfuz. إن كل شيء خلقناه بقدر. And as the Messenger عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said, إن الله قدر مقادير الخلائق قبل خلق السماوات والأرض ب50,000 سنة وكان عرشه على الماء. Allah issued his decrees concerning the measurement and due proportion of the creatures 50,000 years before he created the heavens and the earth. يعني is written in Lawh al-Mahfuz. For all of these taqdirat, a taqdir al-khas, for every specific person. After taqdir al-am, which is taken and comes from Lawh al-Mahfuz, which is taqdir al-am, the general taqdir. As for taqdir al-umari wa yawmi, is juziyat, yani is taken from taqdir al-am, the general taqdir, which is in Lawh al-Mahfuz, where everything is written. And taqdir al-umari, like these four things that are written, are decreed, يعني taqdir al-khas, for every specific person. Now, so what are the four things that are written? He said, بِكَتْبِ رِزْقِهِ وَأَجْلِهِ وَعَمَلِهِ وَالشَّقِيُّ وَالسَّعِيدُ. These are the four things that the angel is commanded to write. To write down his rizq, his lifespan, his actions, and whether he'll be happy or unhappy. As for his rizq, the khaza'in of rizq belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He bestows favor, he's the one that grants gifts, he's the one that provides for who he wills and whatever he wills. For every human being and every creature, the portion of provision is decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has already been written, ya ikhwata. For a soul will not depart from his body until he has fully received what he has been decreed from his rizq. Allah Azza wa Jal has willed, decreed, and recorded a specific amount of rizq for every person, which they will definitely receive. No matter how hard people might strive to prevent this provision that Allah Azza wa Jal has ordained, it will without fail reach the one for who it was written. وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. As Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned in Surah Al-Hud, there is no creature on the earth but that upon Allah is its provision, is rizq. And the word rizq can refer to the thing being provided, or it can refer to the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the act of giving and bestowing. For a distinction is made between rizq as an attribute, meaning the act of granting and gifting, and rizq as the actual substance that Allah Azza wa Jal provides to the created beings. And the scholars, ya ikhwata, discuss an issue here, which is important to mention because it's a masala aqidah, where it's a matter where the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah differentiate between Ahl Bid'ah or from Ahl Bid'ah, especially the Mu'tazila in this mas'ala. And that is that the haram rizq, that which is haram, is it considered rizq? That which a person earns from haram, is it considered rizq? Does it fall under the definition of rizq? Where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. There is no creature on earth but upon Allah is its provision. Does it come under it? Or does it fall under the verse, وَالَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمْ الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وقولوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. وقولوا من رزقه, and eat of his provision. Does it fall under the verse وأنفقوا مما رزقناكم? Allah says, spending away from what we have provided you. Is it included in this category or not? The scholars, they say, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we say, ikhwata, that we must understand that the truth is indicated by the text. That which the truth indicates from the text is that rizq is divided into two categories. We have a rizq al-am and we have rizq al-khas. We have general provision and we have specific provision. As for general provision, general rizq, this encompasses everything, whether it's beneficial, whether it's lawful, whether it's unlawful, halal or haram, anything that provides benefit, whether it is haram or halal, is considered rizq. And this is what indicated in the verse, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. It comes under this. There is no creature on earth that Allah has, but upon Allah is His provision. For it is Allah who created His provision, Allah who decreed it, Allah who wills it, Allah who conveys it to the one for who it was ordained, whether it was haram or halal. As for the second type, which is a rizq al-khas, the specific rizq, this is divided itself into two. Rizq al-halal al-ajsad wa rizq al-ilm wal-iman al-qulub. The first is the lawful provision for the body, and the second is the provision of knowledge and iman of the heart. Regarding the lawful provision that nourishes and benefits the body, this is what is addressed in the verses where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, for example, كُلُوا مِن رِزْقِ رَبِّكُمْ, eat from the provision of your Lord, وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ, spend from what we have provided you. But this refers exclusively to the rizq that is halal. The rizq that is halal. So for example, if a thief says the food is stolen, eat from it, because Allah commanded or permitted eating from Allah's rizq, and this is from Allah's rizq, what would we say here? We say here that this does not fall under the scope of this verse, in this situation. Like, it falls under the general meaning of rizq, and the first category that we mentioned. Or if he wishes to give this stolen money in charity, and he says that this is from the rizq of Allah Azza wa Jal, we say to him it doesn't fall under the specific category, which is the law provision. Allah is pure, He doesn't accept that which is pure. However, it falls under the category of general provision, as we mentioned, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. And the second category within this type is the provision for the hearts, which is al-ilm wal-iman, knowledge and iman. And this is the loftier of the two types. This is the loftier of the two types. And when you supplicate to Allah Azza wa Jalla for rizq, you should not overlook this type. This is the most important rizq. When we make dua, we tend to focus more on the risk of food and wealth and children. Or perhaps a lot of the supplicants in their mind, they are negligent of making dua for this risk, which is more important, the risk of knowledge and the risk of iman. And these categories I mentioned by Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah in his Nuniyah. Go back to his Nuniyah, he has lines of poetry in regards to this. وما استحضر أبيات الآن. فالشاهد to that question, يعني the Ahl al-Bid'ah, like the Mu'tazila, they say that rizq that is haram, or يعني provision that is taken for haram is not considered rizq that Allah has decreed. They say it's not the rizq that Allah has decreed. يعني from those who say that, the Mu'tazila. For they say Allah did not provide this. We say that this saying this unrestrictedly is incorrect. Rather, we say it is not a provision from Allah in one sense. Yani when it comes to this, if we're talking about the specific rizq, or it is a provision from Allah in His general sense, and in another sense, which is the general sense. We have to give that distinction regarding this mas'ala. Shaykh al-Islam in Taymiyyah rahimahullah, if you go to his volume 8, Majmu' al-Fatawa, due to time I won't read it, like he has kalam about it. He mentions this في Majmu' al-Fatawa, volume 8. Now, for the Mu'tazila, what did they say? That haram earnings do not constitute rizq. For according to the logic, if the thieves were to kidnap a child and feed him with stolen goods until he died, it's considered he has not consumed any of his decreed rizq, because the haram rizq does not count as such. For Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we say what? Na'am, it is rizq in a context, whether it is halal or haram. As an accountability associated with the halal or haram of the means is a separate matter. وشاهد يا إخوة, the key takeaway is that a believer's conviction with their provision is guaranteed. For the Messenger ﷺ, he says here, بِكَتْبِ رِزْقِهِ, his rizq is written. The angels write it when he's in the janeen. When you're in your mother's womb, when you was in your mother's womb, it's written for you. For a believer is certain that the provision is guaranteed, and Allah Azza wa Jal has taken charge of it. This instills a sense of tranquility, ikhwata, reassurance, to remain calm, be free from panic or fear, to feel secure and content, to know with certainty that the rizq Allah Azza wa Jal has decreed for them is going to arrive, with certainty. By Allah, if everyone on the earth strove to prevent you from obtaining a single morsel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed and written for you, they will not be able to do so. Your provision will come to you whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not. If the son of Adam were to flee from his provision as he flees from death, his provision will overtake him, as death will overtake him. This instills a sense of confidence, reassurance regarding one's provision, as both has been decreed. Like in the matter of provision is a primary concern for people in our time. This hadith clarifies that it is already settled, it's written, it's ordained. So this enables the believer to seek it without being anxious and being agitated. For a believer should remain reassured, yani, in peace, have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, I'm sure you've all heard the hadith, and it's coming up in the Kitab Al-Arba'een, inshallah. But the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, لو أنكم تتوكلون على الله حق توكله رزقكم كما يرزق الطير. If you rely upon Allah with true reliance, He will provide for you just as He provides for the birds. They go out hungry in the morning, تغدو خصاما وتروح بطانا. They go out hungry in the morning and they return with the bellies being full by the evening. The servant must be absolutely certain of this and realize that all matters originate from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَفِي السَّمَاءِ رِزْقُكُمْ وَمَا تُوعَدُونَ. And in the heaven is your provision of what you are promised. Seek your rizq from Allah Azza wa Jal and rely solely on Him to obtain it. Do not place your trust in yourself or depend on your own strength. Do not let your heart, even worse, to let your heart turn towards another created being. Some people, they rely on their boss, in their job more than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Direct your resolve and anchor your heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And know that if you fear Allah Azza wa Jal, this is the greatest means of securing provision. And reliance, tawakkul, is from the greatest form of taqwa. It's one of the widest gateways through which provision reaches you. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. والله إن هذا باب عظيم لرزق يا إخوة. To have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لذلك Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in Surah Al-Dhariyat, and He ponders upon this, وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون إن الله هو الرزاق ذو القوة المتين. After Allah Azza wa Jal mentions to us that He created us to worship Him alone, He speaks about rizq. They mention benefit here. They say that this shows there's a connection between Iman and perfecting your worship and rizq. People, they look here and there searching for their rizq. Like in many, they overlook this great door that's in front of you and the simplest means of obtaining it. To have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have Iman. Focus on your relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal. It will come to you. It will come to you. From sources that you never imagine. Do not deem anything is too great for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the treasures of Allah remain fully. He has spent since He created the heavens and the earth. And He doesn't lose, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't lose anything. If the king of the earth, one who keeps his word and possesses vast wealth, if he was to tell you to be rest assured, your provision, your bonuses, your salary will come to you from me. This is the king saying it to you. And you know he's a person who keeps his word. You know he's a person who keeps his word and is a person who's got money. So if he says to you, be rest assured, your provision, your bonuses, your salary will come from me. I'll give it to you, do not worry. How would you feel? How would you go about your day and night? Will you not be filled with peace and happiness? There's no stress, right? Even if that provision was destined for you, is slightly delayed, you still feel secure. You know the one who made a promise keeps his promise. He's king. You know he's rich. He's going to give it to you. If that's the case for a man in the earth, then how much more certain can you be when the provider of the providers and the king of the kings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has already said that He has written down your provision. He has promised to give you what is decreed for you from His bounty. Who is more merciful? Servant of Allah. Well, this does not mean that a person should be lazy and abandon the pursuit of livelihood and say that Allah has decreed their provision. My provision is written, has reached me. La, a person has to act. Allah has decreed the provision, has also decreed the means as well. For one must not surrender to passive reliance, using this hadith as an excuse and say, my provision is already decreed, why should I exert myself? The hadith you mentioned, لو أنكم تتوكلون على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير. If we were to rely upon Allah with true reliance, He will provide for you just as He provides for the birds. What did the birds do? Did they sit and sleep? Or did they go out early in the morning? Did they work? And they came back with their bellies full? They worked to get there. Messenger والسلام, said, فَكُلُّ يَسْلَ مَا خُلِقَ لَهُ. Act for everyone is facilitated for which he was created. The point here is that action must be accompanied with reliance, trust, and complete entrusting of one's affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this way, a person combines between two virtues, taking the practical measures commanded by the Sharia and maintaining the reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He commanded. احرص على ما ينفعك واستعن بالله. A Muslim is required to strive and take action, and there's no contradiction between this and the fact that the provision, the risk is already decreed. Because both the cause and the effect are decreed. It is written that a person will strive and exert the necessary efforts to seek the risk, whether they receive it or not, their provision is fixed. For none of it will be missed, and they will not die until they have fully received it. Now, the believer puts his trust in Allah Azza wa Jalla and takes the necessary steps without becoming too attached to them. When he has finished, he's content with what comes, because this is his provision. He does not make himself miserable. He takes the necessary steps. If he receives a little, he's content with it, because this is what is written for him of sustenance. He works and takes the necessary steps and trusts in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala content with what he receives. This person will be happy. Now, then he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, بِكَتْفِ رِزْقِهِ وَأَجَلِهِ, and his lifespan. Whether it will be long or short or average in terms of duration, whether he will die as a youth or mature, as a mature adult or as an elderly person or an extremely elderly age, all of this is written down. For we know that a person's lifespan is written, the decree of life, while he is in the womb. And what is written neither decreases nor increases. At the appointed time of death is a fixed term that neither increases or decreases. فإذا جاء أجلهم لا يستأخرون ساعة ولا يستقدمون, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah An-Nahl. And this does not imply that a person should risk their life or cast themselves into places of destruction. One is entrusted with the care of oneself. This is what the Sharia commands. And there's no contradiction between the hadith regarding preordaining our lifespan and the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. The Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Man sarrahu an yubsata lahu fi rizqihi aw yunsa'a lahu fi atharihi falyasil." Whoever wishes for his provision to be expanded and his lifespan extended or his legacy prolonged should maintain ties of kinship. Some scholars of Al-Ilm, they mention to reconcile between this hadith and the hadith in front of us, that our lifespan is written, and this hadith which shows and says or indicates that whoever wishes for his provision to be expanded and his lifespan to be expanded, he should maintain ties of kinship. Al-Ilm, they answer in reconciling between that hadith and the hadith in front of us. For some, they say that the meaning of the increased provision and delayed time of death in the hadith, some they view it as something haqiqi, a literal increase and change. But this increase and change, it occurs in the records of the angel that was assigned to write it down, as in the hadith in front of us. So it's not something that's changed in Lawh al-Mahfuz. Lawh al-Mahfuz already mentioned what's going to happen. Lakin, it's something that's changed in what the angel writes. What angel? Some scholars, they say, is the angel of death. What is in the hands of the angel of death changes if the person maintains ties of kinship. Some scholars, they say, it's the angel that was appointed over the fetus and has written the decree of his lifespan. But they say that what he has written can be changed if someone maintains his kinship ties, as in the hadith. For example, the angel might be instructed to record a lifespan of 60 years, for example, which is already known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then that individual, he upholds ties of kinship, thereby gaining an additional 10 years. For what is known to Allah does not change. Only the information that was held by the angel, it changes. But this is one opinion. As Allah Azza wa Jalla says, يَمْهُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. يَمْهُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. Allah eliminates what he rules or confirms, and with him is the mother of the book, Lawh al-Mahfuz. Well, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahmahullah, he was upon that opinion. He mentioned it in the 14th volume, في مجموع الفتاوى. Because of time, I will not read what he mentioned. Like, you can go back to the 14th volume. And some of Ahlul Ilm, they say, rather, the increase is qualitative rather than a literal addition to the number of days or years. But the figure of the days or years doesn't change. Rather, it refers, the hadith refers to the barakah. It's something of the quality of life rather than the quantity. So there will be more barakah in his life, more blessings in his life. If he was to observe holding ties of kinship, he will find more barakah in his life. That's the meaning of the hadith. Allah blesses his life, even if it's short. You'll find that his impact and legacy enduring for ages. Like Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, for example, he lived only about 40 years, yet his name and his legacy is here until the hour was established. Many of the scholars of Ahlul Ilm have lived only for 40 or even 30 years, yet the legacy remains. The entire Ummah benefits from their knowledge and is educated by the teachings. And they say in contrast to the one who severes ties of kinship, he's not going to be remembered for anything, let alone remembered for anything praiseworthy, even if he lives 100 years. But they say that that's the meaning of the hadith. ولا شك زيادة المعنوية أنفع لواصل من زيادة الحسية. Having a quality life, even if it is shorter, يعني more barak in your life, even if it's shorter, is more beneficial to the person than having a long life, يعني living for a long amount of years, if it doesn't have that barakah. Because life in reality is a collection of days. What truly matters is what is invested in those days, which are in reality storage where a person stacks what they choose, which will ever bring them delight, Jannah, or distress, which is the hellfire. Nasallahu ta'ala salamatul afiyah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ إِن مَتَعْنَاهُمْ سِنِينَ ثُمَّ جَاءَهُم مَا كَانُوا يُوعَدُونَ مَا أَغْنَى عَنْهُم مَا كَانُوا يُمَتَّعُونَ. Have you considered if we gave them enjoyment for years, and then there came to them that which they were promised? مَا أَغْنَى عَنْهُم مَا كَانُوا يُمَتَّعُونَ. They will not be availed by the enjoyment which they were provided. It avails them nothing, their lifespans. Even if they lived as long as Nuh alayhi salam, will not neither benefit nor help them. For a person must make the most of these moments and his breaths that he takes. That's the reality of his life. Now, then he said alayhi salatu wasalam, we'll finish here inshallah ta'ala, وَأَجَلِهِ وَعَمَلِهِ وَشَقِيٌّ وَسَعِيدٌ. After saying بِكَتْبِ رِزْقِهِ وَأَجَلِهِ, then he said وَعَمَلِهِ, and his actions are written and his deeds are recorded. The recorded deed might be righteous, leading to Allah's pleasure and his Jannah, or it might be evil, leading to his wrath and his hellfire. وَقَدْ يَسْأَلَ السَّائِلَ وَيَقُولُ قَائِلٌ, since my deeds are recorded while I was still in my mother's womb, how can I be held accountable for them? And Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ, and your Lord is never unjust to his servants. This is the argument of the Qadariyah. وَأَهْلُ السُّنَّةِ وَالْجَمَاعَةِ, we say the person is held accountable because Allah Azza wa Jalla has endowed the person, the servant, with a freedom of choice. He guided him to do two paths, good and evil, clarified the way. He showed him the way, what benefits him and what harms him. If he chooses what harms him and abandons what benefits him, despite there being no impediment preventing him from pursuing what is beneficial, he's held accountable for that. And this belief does not contradict the practice of taking necessary measures, obeying Allah's commands and avoiding his prohibitions. Rather, it testifies to the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the vastness of his knowledge, which encompasses all things. But this does not imply that a servant is permitted to neglect the necessary means. For while Allah has decreed all things, he has also commanded the means that is to be pursued. For example, Allah has decreed whether or not a person will marry, but the person is still commanded to take the necessary steps to bring it about. Sah? How is a person going to marry and they just stay in the house? They don't make any means to get married. Allah has decreed the acts of obedience and disobedience that people commit. Upon them is to perform what is prescribed in the Sharia and to exert the necessary effort. ما يقبل أبدا, someone who says أنا لا متجاوز المقدور, I have not gone beyond what was decreed, and they use that to an excuse. No rational person will accept that as a justification. If a person was to hit another person, for example, to rob his property, and then as defense he says this is the decree of Allah, would any person accept that? Any rational person would accept that? They will be they will be ordered to return the property back. They will submit to retribution. But the same principle holds true regarding acts of obedience and disobedience. And then he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, وَالشَّقِيٌّ وَسَعِيدٌ, whether he will be happy or unhappy. For it is recorded that he is blessed. This is based on his entry into Jannah, either ibtida'an or ma'alan, initially or ultimately. For the scholars say it is recorded that he is blessed based on how his life ends, or based on what he will ultimately become. Based on how his life ends, if he concludes with the deeds of the people of Jannah, and he enters Jannah initially without entering the hellfire. And also considering his ultimate fate. That if he was a disobedient Muslim, muwahid, Allah wills to punish him, and he enters the hellfire first, then he enters Jannah, his ultimate end is Jannah. He is blessed in terms of his final destiny. And it is written if he's rich, meaning if he's among the people of the hellfire based on his state or how he ends his life. And Allah Ta'ala salamata wal afiyah. And these are the 4 things that are written. It's also come in another narration, as we already learnt through this lesson, like the hadith of Hudayfa ibn Said in Muslim, that the angel will also ask, Ya Rab, dhakar or untha? Dhakar or untha? Oh my Lord, is it a male or female? But this will also be written. The angel will also write this down. Is it a male or female? And knowledge regarding the gender of the janeen, the fetus, is from the knowledge that is exclusive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إن الله عنده علم الساعة وينزل الغيث ويعلم ما في الأرحام. The last verse of Surah Luqman, Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions the 5 things that are considered the keys of the unseen, that which only Allah Azza wa Jalla has knowledge of. From that which Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned, وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ, that which is in the womb, that which happens in the womb. What is in the wombs, only Allah Azza wa Jalla knows. And this encompasses many things. It includes who is in the womb and what is within it. For this comprehensive knowledge of the fetus development within the mother's womb, moment by moment, is known to none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the knowledge of whether the fetus is male or female, this is also something that only is exclusive to Allah Azza wa Jal prior to the 42-day mark, when the angel is informed of this, as in the hadith. The angel asks this when it's 42 days. When he reaches 42 days, the angel asks the question to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if it's a male or female. Before the 42-day mark, this knowledge is known to none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we have, even in the previous times, in the earlier times, certain individuals that will experience or that will experiment or learn that whatever, if it's a female or male, by different actions. For example, if the pregnant woman the belly was really big, they will consider it a male. This time we live in modern times, the contemporary methods they can find out if it's a male or female. And this does not this practice does not constitute a claim to the knowledge of the unseen, because the exclusive knowledge of the unseen pertains to the period prior to that stage, the 42-day, which is only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this does not constitute a claim to have knowledge of the unseen, because they cannot know it with certainty, nor are they able to determine it until after a aforementioned period has passed. Before that time, the matter remains within the exclusive knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as they cannot discern the gender until the male and the female genital has become distinct and differentiated. And that's a process that occurs after some time. We'll stop there as we went over time, and we weren't able to finish the hadith. لكن إن شاء الله تعالى we'll finish the hadith next lesson بإذن الله تعالى. بارك الله في الجميع وفق الله في الجميع والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم. صلى الله على نبينا وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.